Dogfighting is something that I think is highly misunderstood. Now, I'm not saying that it's given a bad rap. I'm not trying to defend dogfighting. What I am saying is that we don't understand it. We don't like it, but we don't understand it. And when it comes to it, if we don't understand it, how can we say for sure what is wrong about it, what needs to change, what we need to stop doing, what ways we are doing similar in other endeavors? We can't see our own hypocrisy because we're blinded by our own emotion, right? So when it comes to it, I'd like to delve into dogfighting just a little bit um, from a conceptual standpoint. So, when it comes to it, just zooming out a little bit and using professional boxing, a sport we all know here in the U.S., as an analogy, did you know that there was a time in our country, and not just here in the US, but also in Britain, if you go back far enough, did you know that there was a time where boxing was illegal? It was considered exactly the same as we see dogfighting. The language was the same. The people that banned it were the same. The words they used, again, the reasons, all of it, it was the same. It was the same. And now, today, we see boxing as a valid profession. We see MMA, we see UFC. I got a good buddy who is, working through the UFC circuit. Go, Josh. Love you. When it comes to it, it's certainly not struggling from the PR stigma that it had not too long ago. The point of showing that boxing was illegal and now is not, it's showing less about whether or not boxing should be legal, yada yada, more about our, we'll say, emotional decision making processes. We act based on how we feel about something, and we enact laws based on how we feel about something when it comes to this concept, as opposed to enacting it based on a altruistic, cold hard facts, rational, objective standpoint. Have you ever seen the movie Rocky? It is a favorite of many, perhaps even most, of all who have seen it. It is a tale of a man who comes from nothing and wins it all through hard work and dedication. So many great life quotes are in these movies. Here's one of my favorite. This is him talking to his son. He says, "Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life, but it ain't about how, blah, 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 I butchered that. But it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done." Now, consider the proliferation of fighting today. Professional fighting aside, many schools have wrestling teams. Children that haven't been walking for more than 2 years can begin learning martial arts. Getting back to professional fights, boxing is not all there is. There's boxing, of course, but there's MMA, mixed martial arts, there's all kinds of ways for us to pummel one another legally. We just got through talking about the difference between Tosas, how strange they are in the dog world, right? A fighting breed that won't fight. That is what is one of the first things about the Tosa that needs to be understood. They are the fighting breed that does not have to fight, the warrior that does not fight every battle. We're going to zoom out a little bit. When getting back into breeding publicly and advocating for the breed and stuff like that, I'd been thinking for several years that the standard was actually not sufficient to bring out the true nature of the Tosa in the West. Over the last few years, I have thought about things that I would like to change. And there are quite a few things, but I would always try to temper them with moderation. And a very good and respected friend of mine in the Tosa breed. Um, very, very, we'll say, learned and wise and experienced person, whom I have a lot of respect for. She heard me talking about how I want to change the standard and all that other kind of stuff, and how I want to make it to be more inclusive, make sure that it includes both dogs here in the U.S. and in the West, and is inclusive of dogs in their countries of origin. It should not exclude the Japanese Tosa from Japan. It should not exclude the Tosas in Korea. It should not exclude actual Tosas, right? Right? I mean, and case in point, God rest his soul, Mr. Pseudo came to your kennel, and you Western Tosa breeders can chime in on this. If Mr. Pseudo came to your kennel and offered you one of his Yokozunas, you would take it in a heartbeat. You wouldn't care whether that dog was registered with your country's kennel club or not. You would take that dog in a heartbeat, and you would see it as greater than the dogs you already have. Let's be honest, all right? Everybody knows that. And yet and still, we can't seem to put together a standard that includes all these dogs. And that was my goal. That's what I was telling her. And she just asked me point blank, okay, what is it that you really want to do? Like, what is the big picture? And this was an interesting question because I'd never thought of what I wanted to accomplish in the grand scheme of things by that point. And it was tough because she went ahead and slapped some sense into me along the lines of, okay, the real world, kind of like that Rocky speech, right? The real world ain't all sunshine and rainbows, right? In the dog club scene, right? The kennel club scene. And not getting into the politics and drama of all that, it was just a wake-up call that my idealism and my thoughts of the way things should be, excuse me, were not going to be super easy to just go out and do, and people were just going to accept and oh, hey, that sounds great, let's do that. It's not going to be anything like that. And listening and learning, I thought about why. If you look up the Tosa Inu standard from the Japanese Kennel Club, the FCI, the UKC here in the US, the CKC, they all have variations of the same information that makes one thing clear to me. They all lack perspective. They lack purpose. They lack direction. Getting back into the Tosa breed, like to advocate that deeper level, I've been catching up on my research and collecting some new, some old, a lot of borrowed information to try to learn more about the breed deeper. And I actually found an old article that I had read years ago, perhaps around the time I first started in the breed, and I want to include part of it here. It's from January 30th, 1967. It was in Sports Illustrated. You can look it up. The title of the article is Silence Reigns When Japan's Tosas Fight. And the subheading is There is no noise, not even a growl, and no betting either, at Japan's perfectly legal dog fights. And the big, well-mannered Tosa dogs, bred for the fighting ring, seem to like it that way. Written by... the journalist is Donald Plosky. Now again, Sports Illustrated, January 30th, 1967. Title is Silence Reigns When Japan's Tosas Fight. Okay, reading the article, starting, quote, Tosas are trained to be fighters, but they are carefully kept away from serious combat with other dogs until they're at least a year and a half. So from the start, we see a difference, a very stark difference between anything we do with any of our working dogs here in the U.S. There's nobody here in the West who keeps their herding dogs away from sheep until they're a year and a half old, who keeps their protection dogs away from bite work until they're a year and a half old. Certainly not anybody who keeps their fighting dogs away from fighting in fights until they're a year and a half old. Getting back to the article. At that age, a Tosa will fight older, retired dogs for short periods of time to develop his confidence and teach him the technique of fighting. So again, we're going to pause here and say, again, this is not a dog that is baited. This is not a dog that is used or bait animals are used. The dog is fighting an older, experienced, retired dog that is capable of dealing with this for a short period of time to develop his confidence and teach him technique. So from the start, this sounds less like a slave trade and more like what you would expect if you were to take up boxing. You don't start boxing when you're born. You start when you're of a proper age. And at that time, you are taught by somebody who is older and will help teach you technique and develop you as a competitor, right? Getting back to the article, because the Japanese consider a silent dog fight more satisfying aesthetically than a noisy one, Tosas must learn to fight without making a sound. I'm going to insert in here, we're going to get into this later, but that's not entirely accurate. If a young dog growls while fighting, he is reprimanded, but is still encouraged to continue the fight. The dogs fight on a raised wooden platform covered with old carpeting in an octagonal ring 15 feet wide. The dog owners and 3 referees perch around it during the fight, while the audience sits slightly below, as at a boxing match. The Japanese, with their love of rank and ceremony, have designated 3 championship grades: Yokozuna, Ozeki, and Sekiwake. The same ranks used in classifying sumo wrestling champions. The rules vary for different classes. In the championship classes, the dogs are allowed 1 minute of grace, during which they may growl or whine without forfeiting the match. The newer, unranked dogs are allowed 2 minutes of preparation time. Once this period is over, if either dog makes the slightest sound, he will lose the match. Several matches are stopped during every tournament when alert judges hear a sound that the audience does not. The time limit for a match is 30 minutes, but they rarely go the limit. If both dogs are on their feet fighting to the end, each is credited with a win. If excessive bleeding occurs, if one dog establishes immediate superiority over another, or if one dog is unwilling to fight, the match is halted. After a particularly hard exchange, the judges will often stop the fight to look the dogs over. If a dog sits down from exhaustion, he must regain his feet within 3 minutes or lose. Tosas will sometimes lean on each other, ribs pounding, paws thrown over their opponent's shoulders, and ignore the cries of their owners in the crowd to mix it up. If one dog begins fighting within 3 minutes and the other does not, the non-fighter loses. Experienced dogs seem to fight by the rules, resting periodically before starting again. The Japanese fans' attitudes towards dogfighting is best understood when one realizes there is no gambling or betting. Tosas are fought strictly for sport, and when a judge stops a fight, his decision is never protested. And again, I'm going to insert my thoughts here. A judge stops a fight and his decision is never protested. Yeah, because that's how we do things here. Right? In the NFL and the NBA and all that kind of stuff, right? No, we don't do that. We don't respect the rules of the referees that we put in there to enforce the rules. Conversely, when Tosa judges stop a fight or call a fight, their decision is never protested, and it is a matter of dignity that it is not. Anyway, back to the article. The atmosphere of a Japanese dogfight is like that of a family picnic. Men bring their wives and children, sit on straw mats, and enjoy the spectacle. After the matches, owners bathe their dogs, dress them in the championship belt and robe proper to their status, and parade them in front of the crowd. Silver loving cups, championship trophies, and flags are presented to both winners and losers. Many bows and congratulations are exchanged, and much good-humored chaffing goes on between the owners. Challenges are called as the crowd applauds the official announcement of a dog's victory or promotion to a higher championship class. At the last prefectural tournament in Ito, 70 miles south of Tokyo, a famous local champion suddenly refused to fight. His owner leaped into the ring to explain that his dog was nervous in front of such a large crowd. The owner tipped his cap and bowed low in 4 directions before leading his peace-loving dog away to wild applause. Those in favor of the sport point out that a Tosa has never been killed or crippled in a fight. A veterinarian is always present, and his decision to stop a fight, like that of the referee, is never protested. Legal dogfighting in Japan is vastly different from the illegal sport conducted on remote farms in the U.S. by gamblers and coarse-grained owners. Again, these are the words of the article writer. The Japanese sincerely believe their gigantic dogs enjoy the matches. Their tails wag as they fight. Thus, do they not fight with pleasure? An old man asked me. Now, why is this important? Because outside of Japan, I feel like the Tosa fan club, so to speak, we have completely and collectively lost perspective. Again, why is that important? Because, getting back to the hard-hitting question that my friend asked me, if all I can do is say that the breed standard needs to change without being able to say why, I may as well be a 5-year-old child walking through a museum with a box of finger paints. I originally wanted changes that took us back to the way the Tosa was when it left Japan. However, that didn't quite rectify the then breed with the now modern examples coming out of Japan. I could only swap one constraint for another. However, I've since come to see another way. When Westerners took Tosas out of Japan, they only took the dogs and left everything else behind. That was our first mistake. In many ways, it was the primary error that led to all the rest. And until we address that, we cannot hope to do anything more than change one mistake for another. We left Japan with the idea that we would do the breed a favor by not calling them a fighting dog. And to be clear and to be fair, again, we've talked about the stigma associated with dog fighting and fighting dogs, particularly fighting dogs. And we've talked about how that's a tough sell here in the West. So I get it. I get why the people who started working with this breed before I was born, right, here in the U.S., why they tried to do everything they could to place themselves as far away from the idea of the Tosa being a fighting dog as they possibly could. They turned it into a gimmick and completely avoided the substance of the conversation, right? I get why they ran from the subject. I do. But we're not doing them a favor by pretending like they're something that they're not. Now, granted, Western blood sport has put such a bitter taste into the collective mouth of society that anything that has to do with dogfighting is seen as the utterly worst expression of humanity. Yet the idea that what happens in Japan is even remotely similar to what happens elsewhere is utter nonsense. Now, we can look back over the Sports Illustrated article, for example. I want to challenge anyone who knows anything about the dogfighting that happens outside of Japan to find me one single thing that, when compared to the accounts of how Tosa fights are handled, is the same outside of Japan as it is there. It's not the same. Let's get real. It is not the same. I grew up in the city of Houston, Texas. There is no part of there is no part of the Western fighting experience that even remotely resembles the way things are done in Japan. In fact, most of the facts are polar opposites, and that down to the detail. There's virtually no argument or supporting proof against Western dogfighting that can even be considered remotely applicable to what happens in Japan. They are not the same. And the dogmen know it too. That is to say, Western dogmen do not consider what happens in Japan with Tosas dogfighting. And the Japanese dogmen do not see the merits of what Western dogmen do with their dogs. That needs to be made clear. They do not see each other as the same. They are not the same. So why do I bring this up? I've been playing the devil's advocate this whole part of this series, right? Am I actually going to advocate dogfighting? To a certain extent, I am advocating a fighting breed, but I am not advocating dogfighting. The Tosa, I can say, the Tosa is unique out of all other breeds in existence. The Tosa is the fighting breed. When we talk about purpose, the Tosa can be described as being a dog made for just one thing. We have to start with an understanding of that. Now let's take a look at one of the things that makes the Tosa stand out from any other fighting dog on the entire planet. I want you to Google the top 20 fighting breeds out there. Find me one that had just one purpose. Your American Pit Bull Terriers and American Staffordshire Terriers, quite frankly, anything with bull in its name, was bred to be a bullfighter, a bull baiter. From there, they went to killing rats, and then from there, they went to fighting dogs. All along the way, they've been used for hunting as catch dogs, they've been used as farm dogs, they've been used as pets. All throughout history, that has been the case for any of the bull breeds. You can put any of them in there. If we're talking about a dog that has bully in the name but is not a bull breed, right? A traditional bull breed, the bully cutter, bully kuta. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but bully cutter. It was actually a hunting breed and guard dog. The fighting thing was actually started because they wanted the dog to be able to prove that it would confront a enemy or a large predator out there in the wilds. If you look at the way bully kutas are fought, you will see that the owners and handlers are constantly walking around in the middle of the fight, touching the dogs, petting them, pushing them, massaging them, and all that other kind of stuff. And again, a lot of that has to do with the purpose of their fights. It's not about the fight itself. It's about a temperament test, or at least traditionally it was about a temperament test. And the same dogs that fought against each other in the morning can go out and hunt together in the evening. Now, these days, the fighting aspect of it has started to break off, and I think a lot of the Western dogfighting culture is starting to be adapted, so they're starting to breed Western dog breeds into a lot of the bully cutters over there, and they're starting to fight for fighting as an end in itself. But even to date, these dogs do not have one single purpose. Your Rottweiler, we know that they have multiple purposes, even as a herder. Your Bull Mastiff was a estate guardian and a poacher, a game warden's dog. American Bulldog is a farm dog, catch dog, general working dog. The Presa Canario is all the above, but guardian mostly. And also used to hunt down, if I recall correctly, hunt down slaves as well. Cane Corso, protection dog, estate guardian, personal protection dog. Kangal is a livestock guardian, as are many of the popular fighting breeds these days. They're livestock guardians. That's what they were bred for. That's what they were designed for. The Shar-Pei, the Akita, Dogo Argentino, Neapolitan Mastiff, Boer Doberman, English Mastiff, German Shepherd, Caucasian Shepherd, and yes, that includes the Volkodav, which is based off of the Shepherd dog. Guldong, Fila Brasileiro, Bull Terrier, Korean Jindo, Tibetan Mastiff, Alano Espanol, Alibi, Band Dog, Volkodav. We already talked about those two, sorry. But the Band Dog, right? If we look at all these breeds, they were bred for other things. And to this day, they're bred for other things. The Tosa has only ever had one purpose. Only one thing that decides whether or not they get to live. Only one thing that decides whether or not they get to breed. Only one thing. So, when it comes to it, I will say that is something that makes the Tosa stand out for certain among fighting breeds. Now, that being the case, let's consider the implications of that. If fighting, again, in defense of those who tried to avoid it like the plague back in the day, I feel like many largely do to this day, if fighting is so controversial that we can't even talk about it, we can't talk about Tosas. There's nothing else that they do. There's nothing else that they have done. There's nothing else that they have been bred for. There's nothing else that explains anything about that dog than the fighting ring. You cannot explain a single thing about a Tosa outside of the fighting ring. You have to start there. Now, here's a quick little point for you. If I'm a German Shepherd dog breeder and I say German Shepherds are the best protection dog, or German Shepherds are the best herding dog, you would say, oh yeah, I think he may be wrong, he might agree with me or disagree with me, but you can say this person likes their dogs. And of course, why shouldn't they? Of course they should. Why else are you breeding if you don't like the breed, right? If somebody says the Bloodhound is the best tracking dog, the best scent dog, the Greyhound is the best coursing dog, the fastest dog, again, people have their things that they are fans of. And when you consider how every dog breed on the planet has multiple things that they were bred for, even the pit bull. When pit bulls started reaching this newfound acceptance that I think we've seen, acceptance rates go up here recently in the past 10 to 15 years. I think that a lot of it had to do with focusing on the pit bull outside of the fighting pit. And there are many things that they've been bred for and used for. Traditionally, hunting and farm dogs being the main things. And so many people can tell a story, especially going back a generation or two, so many people can tell a story of how they were raised by a pit bull, right? So nanny dogs. I mean, there's so many other things that they did. So I don't have to say a pit bull is the best fighting dog on the planet. I could say they're the best working dog on the planet. They're the best hunting dog on the planet, the best catch dog on the planet. I can say all these things, and that's great. And people will say, hey, this person likes pit bulls, and they're also not, scum of the earth, right? I don't have that option with Tosas, especially now if we're going to talk about their origins, their history, and why it bears on where they need to go moving forward. We can't make a case for the dog outside of the ring. We can't say that this breed matters. We can't say any of that. We can't. Why? Because we won't start with the only thing that has defined that dog from eternity past. When it comes to Tosas, right? If we're talking about German Shepherd dogs, if I say German Shepherd dogs are the best, you're going to say he likes German Shepherd dogs. If I say Collies are the best herding dog because of the eye, you'll say, oh, he likes those Collies. If I say that that Catahoulas are the best catch dogs, you'll say he likes Catahoulas. If I say Tosas are the best fighting dogs in the world, I'm going to have half the people on the planet trying to take my head off and put it on a silver platter, and then I'm going to have the other half of the people on the planet saying, oh, really? I bet your dog can't beat my yada, 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 and he can't take on to this, that, and the other thing, and yada, 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 and they completely miss the point on both sides. I can say that the Tosa is the greatest fighting dog on the planet. The people who went through the process of actually creating a fighting dog were completely undistracted by what they were trying to make. There was no other purpose. There was no other rubric or metric. They were not even pets. They had no other purpose. This dog was designed head to toe to do what it does. It should not be hard to imagine that they are the best at it, and therefore, so they sit on that top. And again, it should be okay for me to say that. without thinking that I'm advocating dogfighting, without thinking, I mean, if somebody says that German Shepherds are the greatest herders on the planet, they don't necessarily have to have sheep and work their German Shepherds. Even to say that. It can be based on research. It can be based on a lot of different things. And you don't require that of them, right? Why should that be any different with the fighting breed? Why is it? I think that has a lot to do with how we feel about dogfighting and less to do with logic and looking at the thing objectively. It was designed to do it. Probably the only breed on the planet that was actually designed to do it. Most other breeds, all other breeds, quite frankly, were found to have a propensity for it, and even we'll get into more of that later. But they were found to have a propensity for it, and there are even large amounts of people that breed those breeds for that now. But even then, they still use them for other things. They still have other intentions and purposes. That is not the case with the Tosa Inu. If you're getting a Tosa from Japan, if you're getting a Tosa from Korea, there is only one reason why that dog exists, and that is because the dogs that it was bred from, going back to before 1100 AD, were fighting dogs. And not just fighting dogs used for fighting, but champions, because only the top gets bred. That is it. If we can't talk about fighting, we can't talk about Tosas. I'm going to say that again. If we can't talk about fighting, we can't talk about Tosas. I can't describe them to you. If you're looking at the breed description in the FCI, no wonder it's so sparse and nonsensical. No wonder it's based off of stuff that doesn't actually make sense when you sit down and look at it versus the actual dogs. No wonder it's so ambiguous where it could be precise and so constrictive where it should be open. No wonder it's missing the point. If you take Tosas out of the ring to explain them, you can't explain a single thing. Why are they so thick-furred? Thick-skinned? Why is their skin so thick and heavy? Why is their bone so heavy? Hey, that dog looks skinny in that Japanese ring. We need to put weight on him. Why not set the fat record? How about we make a dog that's only 27 inches at the shoulder, but needs to weigh 180 to 190, 200 pounds in order to prove a point about how they are mastiff and therefore they have to be big. How about we just focus on, and this is something that a friend of mine from the show scene was talking about, how about we worry more about a scissors bite and sufficient wrinkle on the head than anything else? Whether or not the dog is actually functional, whether or not the dog is actually capable, whether or not the dog is actually suited for any kind of work, let alone sustained, intense work like what they were originally bred for. How about we worry about everything that doesn't matter and completely forget the things that do? When you take the dog from their original purpose without first getting an understanding of that, you can't put them towards anything else, and the dog you're going to end up with is not going to be anything like what they were originally bred for. And I got to be clear, I'm not advocating dogfighting. I'm not saying the only way to breed a Tosa is to breed them for dogfighting. What I'm saying is you have to start in the ring before you can say what else this thing is good for. What are the ways this thing might be able to be applied? What else this dog can teach us? You have to start where they start. You have to understand the thing. Otherwise, it's like trying to figure out why you can't use a hammer as a screwdriver. Why you can't use a screwdriver as a hammer. Why you can't use a jackhammer to paint a wall. You get what I'm saying? I just want to be clear with that. Let's zoom out. We're coming to the tail end of this. Let's zoom out and think about something. Let's imagine a world without fighting dogs. Let's say that the fever dream of the fighting dog haters got their wish. They got their wish. Everything came true exactly as they wanted, and there's no such thing as a fighting dog. What if we applied that same rule for people? What if people weren't allowed to fight for any reason? We just made it a rule. Let me rephrase that, because that sounds like that's just making the case for dogfighting. What if people who fought were considered damaged goods? Any sort of boxer, any sort of professional person that taught it. Could we have self-defense classes? Is it really hard to see why there might be a case for keeping around people who know how to fight? What about military? Now, granted, there are a lot of people with a lot of different reviews on the military and war and stuff like that, and I get that. But in the world we live in, would you really put your money where your mouth is, for those of you who feel like we need to completely get rid of the military? Would you really put your money where your mouth is and get rid of the military if you were president today? Would you absolve the military, completely destroy it entirely? Would you do that? If we can say we live in a real world with real threats, real things going on, we can imagine a world without fighting dogs, but can you imagine a world without protection dogs? Can you imagine a world without dogs that are livestock guardians, without dogs that are capable of putting up a fight for any reason? In that world, you tell me, who would you really want next to you in a fight? Would you be able to destroy every fighting breed, every protection breed, every dog that's made to battle? Would you be able to destroy them and comfortably say that you would never miss them? Consider the case of Morocho, the doggo argentino, right? He was the dog that defended the two little girls from the cougar that was trying to kill him. Now, let's say we didn't have dogs that were tough, the bull breeds, the fighting breeds, any of the dogs that look like that. They just look like a big, gigantic white pit bull, right? What if we got rid of them entirely? Do we really think that that dogo versus cougar fight would have had the same outcome if the dogo was a collie instead, or perhaps a Dalmatian, or a golden retriever, our softer, better pet breeds? Did you know that there's recently a video, actually, out of a puma that went after a giant schnauzer in the backyard of the owner?
A close call in California after a mountain lion attacked a dog.
It happened in Laverne, that's about 30 minutes east of Los Angeles. Video captured the moment that you see that mountain lion pounced on the dog. Wow. Ooh, a giant schnauzer named Holly Jolly. She was in her backyard. Holly's owners were watching. They started screaming, understandably, distracting the mountain lion, and that allowed the dog to get free. Holly Jolly required surgery and stitches, but will recover. The owners say they posted this video online to warn neighbors about dangerous big cats in the area.
What a brave girl.
Yes.
The giant schnauzer would have been killed right there on the spot by that cat. He already had it by the neck. He would have killed that dog. Nobody would have had a clue. But the owner happened to be walking by and saw it and caused enough of a commotion to confuse that cougar, that puma, and get the dog inside. Get the dog inside. And of course, the puma ended up running off in confusion, came back 20 minutes later looking to finish the job it started. And I can guarantee you that is not the last time they're going to see that puma. Giant Schnauzer is a serious working breed for a certain, in certain regards, but it is not a fighting breed. Now, don't get me wrong, I do not hate Giant Schnauzers. In fact, they were on my short list of breeds to get before I got a Tosa. They were on my short list of breeds. Them, Great Danes, Dobermans, etc., a few others. Dog de Bordeaux, quite a few others. But I love me a good giant schnauzer, but I'm going to be realistic about what they were built for. They are not built to deal with a puma. Let's be serious. Get one of your safe dogs. Get one of your safe breeds, right? Instead of the dangerous breeds that come up when you look for dogs that fight. Get one of your dogs that wouldn't put up a fight. And if you're walking down the road and a puma shows up, what would you want next to you? Would you prefer a Labrador? Let's put it in people terms, right? Kimbo Slice fought most of his career on the street before he ever became a professional fighter. And, you know, of course, there's a certain type of ilk that involve themselves in street fighting, right? Let's make that case. Who would you hire as a bodyguard? Somebody dangerous and big and capable of doing a lot of damage, like Kimbo Slice? Or would you hire somebody properly sized and safe, like Jake from State Farm? Really? Really? What do you look for in a bodyguard? If I need protection in a fight, I would rather get Amina, my little pit, than most other dogs, like most other breeds. Certainly wouldn't get her. I mean, certainly wouldn't get the lab over her. But I'd get Amina because she has the personality and temperament to do as Rocky said. How hard can you get hit and keep moving forward? But as tough as she is, she's still just a 30-pound, 40-pound dog. She is a pit bull. They are not a big dog. And there's a lot of people that try to make cases for a catch weight pit bull, trying to put them up at 80 pounds. That is not a pit bull. I mean, there are dogs that are from certain lines that are bred along heavier directions, but that is not a pit bull. That is not. That is a hybrid. That is a dog that's bred off of different things. Oftentimes these dogs are band dogs, or they come from band dog lines, you know, when it comes down to it. But the pit bull, the working, properly trim and completely lean pit bull, is a dog that's like 30 to 50 pounds. That's not a big animal. And even then, I wouldn't put that animal against a puma. There are a lot of people that are going to hate me for that. You're probably going to put a lot of hate in that comment section about me saying that I don't think a pit bull is a good match when dealing with pumas. I do not. But if I had to pick somebody to deal with that situation for me, I'd pick Amina, because I know she's gonna go in there swinging full force. She will not take no for an answer, and the harder you come at her, the harder she comes back. As a matter of fact, she needs you to come at her hard because that's what makes her energized. If I have to deal with a fight, if I have to deal with something going on, if we're out for a walk and some animal comes at us, if we're out for a walk and somebody's loose dog comes charging at my baby, if their loose dog suck come charging at my baby, while I am going to do what I have to do as her father, I would most definitely appreciate having a stick with me or a bat or some form of a weapon. Just the same, I would most definitely appreciate having a dog that is perfectly comfortable dealing with the 5 or 6 dogs that are charging at us right now. A dog that is perfectly capable of not fighting as long as they don't fight and not instigating anything. But a dog that is absolutely not going to tolerate them getting past him towards his family. That should not be hard to imagine why we need fighting breeds. It should not be controversial to say, I want a dog that can fight. And if we're looking at the history of dog fighting in this first part of broaching the subject of dog fighting, in its, we'll say, controversially best form, Dogfighting is something that originated and is propagated in several parts of the world because they wanted to simply test the temperament of the dog. They want to make sure that the dog is capable of doing the work, and they test the dog not only temperamentally, but they test to a certain extent what they've built into the dog structurally, how well it holds up. Because you're never going to know. You don't have a cougar to practice with for your dogos. You don't have a leopard to practice with for your Kangals, for your your dogs that are out there. You don't have lions to practice with, quite frankly, for your Rhodesian Ridgebacks, for your Borbals. You have to find a way to test your work. And so they did. They did. And again, I'm not advocating for it. I, as a dog trainer and behavior therapist, think there are far better ways to be able to test that. But I can see why they did what they did. And when I'm talking to somebody that's doing it for those reasons, I know where they're coming from, and I know how to make a case that speaks to them. I know how to reason with them in a way that doesn't come across as just somebody preaching at them, screaming at them, talking at them. I'm talking with them. That's part of the case I want to make as we're talking about dog fighting here. There is much to be said about fighting breeds. There is much to be said about a dog that was made to stand and fight. Again, there is a lot to be said for the fighting dog. For the fighting breed. There's a lot to be said for a dog that doesn't care if he's smaller, but will stand up to a challenge and will face adversity. There's a lot to be said for a dog that takes his lumps and comes back harder. There's a lot to be said for a dog that will not give up and always moves forward. There's a lot to be said for a dog, further, that is actually designed to fight, actually designed to be a bodyguard, to be a protector, to be that fighter. There is a lot to be said for that. And that is part of the reason why we have to start in the ring. If we pretend like Tosas aren't fighting dogs, then we have nothing we can say for them. But if we can talk about dog fighting objectively, rationally, logically, we can find that there's a lot there that can be applied in other places. But we got to start working with the truth. We got to start working with the reality instead of trying to deny it. So, I have run my mouth for quite some time now. I hope that this makes some sense to you guys. I hope that you guys can see what I'm saying here. And that we'll be able to not get too distracted from what the point of the channel is and from what the point of this series is. Again, this is Understanding the Tosa. Not a competition to see who the biggest, baddest one is, or to see who, talks the best game. It's not about that. So, all that said, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. I will say thank you so very, very much for checking us out, for hearing us out today. Hopefully, we can get to our next video in the series on the schedule, and we will continue to stay on the schedule, but we will see how that works out. For now, thank you, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys so very much for checking out our channel, for watching our videos. I hope I wasn't too boring. Thank you for following us or watching us. If you do not already follow us, please follow. If you have not liked this video, please like, and please subscribe, and you'll be able to keep up with the next videos we put out about Tosas. We love what we do here. There'll definitely be more videos, and you can learn a bit more about the breed, learn a bit more about us, and hopefully it'll be stuff that you'll find useful. One other thing I would say is that if you can, please share our information. I know a lot of people will say share, but for us it's actually more important You may not know this, but the Tosa is what we might consider an endangered species here in the U.S. and even in the West. I would say the place that the place that the Tosa is right now is not unlike the place where the pit bull was in the mid 50s throughout the 70s, in that they no longer are used for their original purpose here in the U.S. Thank God. They are not used for their original purpose. So that kind of leaves a vacuum. The breed's notoriety is going down in that vacuum, but what that opens the door for is for bad actors to get a hold of what remaining specimens there are and use them for, we'll say, nefarious purposes. And when it comes to it, this is a wonderful breed. We just barely got the pit bull to where it's like 50-50 publicity, right? I'd hate for the Tosa to be the next dog everybody hates. So please share as much as you can. Get the information out there about the breed. It took so long for the pit bull to make a comeback, not because of breeding and responsible breeding practice. No, there's always been people that have been breeding pit bulls responsibly. You know, what it took was having people in their corner, advocates, people who could stand up and say, that's not the way pit bulls act in reality. That's a dog that's been abused. That's a dog that's been mistreated. That's a dog that's been mistrained. And that can happen to any breed, you know? And the more that those people get out there, the more you see the pit bull coming out in a better light, you know? Unfortunately, it's still got a long way to go, but that was the change. And the same thing is true for the Tosa. We need people who are going to get out there and say, hey, look, that behavior right there, that's not a Tosa. This, that, the other thing, that's not Tosa behavior. This is an example of an unfortunate set of circumstances that befell an individual dog. It is not what is to be expected of the breed as a whole. So when it comes to it, I think it's super important that you share, even more than liking and subscribing, which would be awesome. But share so that the information gets out there and more people learn the truth about the Tosa. All of it, not just the fighting past, but where they are today and where they're heading. Hopefully, more people will see this, more people will share, and the information will be out there. Again, you don't necessarily have to want to get a Tosa yourself, but learn about the breed. We need more advocates. Hopefully, some people watching this will find that true and become an advocate for this wonderful, amazing breed. Thank you guys so much for your time. We'll let you go and enjoy your life and let Mr. Dante get on to his kibble for the day.